Climate panel. What is it? We'll take a close look now on what they have done for the past 20, 30 years and what kind of organization we are dealing with. Within the climate war, we can observe people grabbing other people's money, the pyramid scheme, or the pork barreling, as the US normally says. And we can see groupthink, we can see scientific fraud, or if we want to be more civil, it's a scientific bias. And we can see climate religion, especially among younger people and the NGOs. So what is groupthink? Groupthink means there is no thinking taking place at all. And that means that's the same thing as consensus policy. Groupthink is consensus. And how do we break up the consensus? I discussed that with an expert on political communication 10 years ago. And he told me, Mr. Geir was his name, he told me that when all politicians agree on the topic, regardless of which topic it is, there is no drama, there is no struggle, there is no conflict. So there is nothing at all to write about for the media. So when some well-known politicians break away from the consensus, there will be fights, there will be drama, and the journalists will come running. And some of them will write stories we will all love in this room. I will digress here. What is the most scaring drama we can think of within the climate wars? It's not the scare stories we have seen here today. It's not about the shrinking sheep of Scottish islands or frogs barking more loudly because of global warming. No, the most dramatic story today we can tell a journalist is there is actually no climate crisis. All your readers will go completely crazy if they can read about this in your paper. It must be possible to sell this concept to some newspaper somewhere. So that's a challenge to the two journalists in the room. How do we do that? So then we go to the matter of climate science. As you can see from my listing, it's easy to find. We can even find it within the climate panel. In the first assessment report in 1990, they actually wrote that the emissions from human beings into the atmosphere have so far not resulted in any changes of temperature. And the second question was, when will our emissions be so large that they can be seen in global temperatures? And they even answered that question in the first assessment report. They wrote that if the strong global warming we had in the 1990s continues, we will see the effect on the temperatures in the 1940s. But then, as you all know, in 1998, the global warming stopped, even according to the IPCC scientists. They didn't admit it until 2013 in the fifth assessment report. But that's another story. What is science? This should cover it. You have to look at all the data, draw the conclusion in the end based on all the data, not only the data which fits the conclusion you started with as a politician. Some speak of the CO2 theory or the hypothesis, but I have never seen a CO2 hypothesis formulated within the scientific concept, because they need to tell us what kind of weather over how long time will falsify the CO2 hypothesis. So what we are facing is not a scientific theory or hypothesis. It's a fixed idea. It's a silly idea. It's a myth. The IPCC mandate is interesting because for more than 30 years, the English original, made clear that they only assessed human-induced climate change. They didn't assess natural climate science. This was outside the mandate for the IPCC, which meant they could ignore most of it. And then with the newest assessment report, they came up the new text for the mandate. In this assessment report, there was no longer any natural warming since the pre-industrial period. Everything was caused by us. So they can leave out this distinction between human-induced climate and natural climate. We then come to how do they work in the IPCC? They have processes, they have procedures, they have rules. And are these scientific or are they political? We'll get back to that later on. And let us take a look at the first huge scandal, the hockey stick. In the US, there were two hearings in the Senate. The Wegman report and the North report, the latter one from the American Scientific Society, and both concluded that the hockey stick was not based on science. By looking at the statistics used by Michael Mann and his co-conspirators, they could find out that any science, if there was any science in the report, was not valid because of the faulty use of statistics. So the hockey stick they used to scare everyone with for the next 20 years is not science. It's politics and it's money grabbing. In 2009 we came to ClimateGate. Much has been said about it. But the key concept here is that among themselves, they agree that we are right, they are wrong. We have won the scientific debate. And what is important for them is not to lose the political debate out in the media, because the political debate is deciding if they get money or not, if they have jobs or not. And that's much of the reason why we cannot get our views into the media, because our views will kill most of the jobs in the climate industrial complex. And that, of course, cannot be permitted, seen from their side. One of the worst things they've done is adjust the data. All the data which doesn't fit with their conclusions has gradually been changed. And most important among this data is the temperature, which has been changed in almost all the data sets. As you all know, we had global warming in the previous century equally divided between the first half and the second half of the century. And from 1940s until 1975 or 76, we had global cooling, strong global cooling. And they didn't like that, so they tried to remove what they called the warming blip around 1940. And they are still at it. All the scandals, including the hobby stick, forced the IPCC to have someone assess the climate panel, not the climate science, but the climate panel. So they had the IAC, the Inter-Academy Council, which is a worldwide organization. It is medicine, it is engineering, and it's natural sciences. So it's everyone who are qualified to assess the IPCC. And here are some of their conclusions. Lead authors, not qualified. Decisions are political, and so on. As this is the United Nations, all the developing countries, they have a quota of IPCC authors. They are entitled to it. So, as you all know, most of the developing countries don't have a whole lot of climate scientists. So most of the developing country scientists who became IPCC authors are not qualified. They don't understand the concept when decisions are taken. And on top of that, in the United Nations, there is also a quota for women. I haven't gone into that, but a fair number of IPCC authors are women. Obviously, many of those are not qualified. Some are. But we then have a situation where most of the scientists in the room taking a decision regarding the text in one or more chapters will have no clue whatsoever what they are talking about in the room. That's the climate panel. And of course, they have rules saying that the science they are basing their conclusions on must be peer-reviewed. That's not true. Some are not. And when that was pointed out, they removed the grey distinction in the reports. So now you have to go and look at each and every publication to find out if it's peer-reviewed or not. Then we have the global warming. A shocking change from 2013 to 2021, from at least 50% to close to 100%. And when they were faced with this change, they said, well, when we said at least 50% in 2013, we meant almost 100%. But none of these conclusions have any scientific basis. It's all politics. Here is one example from the Goddard Institute of Space Studies. Since James Hansen came to lead that agency, they have no longer been interested in space science, but they are very interested in climate science, and especially temperatures. Here you can see a red bar and a blue bar. Watch how the blue bar rises above the red bar as the years go past. Ole Humlum, the excellent Danish-Norwegian scientist, he noticed this in 2008, and he started downloading data, and he made up this graph showing that there is a systematic effort to cool the past and warm the recent past. And the net effect, you get a temperature curve which has the same shape as the emissions from Mauna Loa of CO2. And of course, this is not science by the Goddard Institute of Space Studies. When Humlum discovered this, he called the effects administrative human-caused global warming. But these days, on his own climate site, Climate for You, he uses the term temporal stability. Then we have the models. Olaf told us a lot about the models. And as we can see, the models are much warmer than the temperatures. And the distance between them is increasing. And this means that most likely the real warming is nowhere near the 1.5 degrees to 4.5 degrees area, which the models are based on. Most probably, the warming effect from doubling of CO2 is less than 0.5 degrees. At least that's what Richard Lindzen, the MIT professor, wrote in 2007. Then we have the latest hockey stick. It's the 2,000-year-old hockey stick. It goes back 2,000 years, I mean. And of course, as the previous hockey sticks, it's a fraud. And before the latest assessment report came up, they discussed this within the IPCC. And after a heated debate, they agreed that they couldn't use this graph, so it was removed from the final version to be published. And after everyone had agreed on this, someone put it back in. We don't know who. And of course, we have the debate we haven't touched so far today. What comes first, cause or effect? The science is quite clear, both for the current area and for the geological area, millions, hundreds of millions years back, actually. This is the end. I have selected 4 leading scientists, what they really think about climate and global warming. You can all read this. No. They are actually not taking the IPCC seriously at all. If you have questions, we can take those now.
Yeah, I had a question. Can you go back to the hockey stick that you showed?
This one?
This one, yeah. It's interesting that these 2 hockey sticks are very different in shape. And what I wonder about, is it the same data that I have used, or is it new data that they are putting in?
The left one is the new hockey stick from a larger group of scientists. 1/3 of them left the group because of this misuse of their hockey stick.
Yeah, but is it more data? Is it no other proxies than these 3 rings that I have used before? You know that?
It's the same methods used by same statistic methods used by Michael Mann.
PCA, principal component
Yes.
analysis.
Yes.
But this is a Pages 2K.
Yes, it's a Pages 2K consortium.
So that is 3 rings, but also other proxies.
Yes.
All of it cooked together.
Yes, and the Canadian, Mr. McIntyre, he had a look at those proxies, and the quality of most of them is very, very low. The graph on the right side here is a mixture of models and observations, and it's all cooked together to prove that the IPCC is right. So it's no more serious than the hockey sticks.
The difference that the right one is from 1850 and the other is from the 2,000 years.
Yeah, that is true.
Yes, yes, it's another scale.
And then the right one is just recent times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have also lost this cooling period from the 40s. That's not shown in the last one.
Well, it's a small one.
Kind of.
Is it?
Small bit, but
Then it's only a very small blip.
It's flat.
Yes.
Yeah.
The blip is becoming smaller and smaller for every year passing. More questions? No more questions, and I'm finished. Thank you very much. Oh, yes.